Hey guys, all right, so let's talk about exercise prescription and training for folks with diabetes. Try to center this box up a little bit more here if we can. Okay, so the benefits of exercise training for folks with diabetes, I mean, there's so many, and we know the benefits of exercise for people already. Don't push the buttons, okay? So you can have that. So chronic benefits of exercise include improved metabolic control, meaning their blood sugar is going to be better regulated by the body. We're going to have decreases in potential hypertension, which is really important to help mitigate the increased risk. Don't chew on that. Don't do that. To help mitigate the increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Going to benefit with improving lipid levels. Remember, we already know that exercise increases good cholesterol and decreases, and that helps to decrease bad cholesterol. So again, we're going to help to offset the increased cardiovascular disease risk from diabetes by making these other things much better. We're going to improve body composition and weight loss, and also improve psychological well-being. Guys, I got my little buddy here helping me out again. How are we doing, Zach? We good? Today I think we're building a bulldozer. Did you find your bulldozer? Drop it in my teeth. That's a good job. Okay, so exercise prescription, some special considerations, microvascular and macro and microvascular disease. So if a person also has had a heart attack or also has peripheral artery disease, of course, we're going to follow, specific exercise prescription recommendations for those diseases. What do we do about microvascular disease? What do we do about neuropathy, for example? Exercise needs to be, please don't push that, okay? No, don't do that. Exercise must be prescribed with careful considerations to risks and benefits. If a person's got advanced neuropathy, I do not want them going to a step class where they're going to be moving around real quickly, potentially fall, trip, hurt themselves. But again, I don't want them to not exercise to the extent that they should be, because then they will miss out on those benefits of exercise that I really want them to get. Exercise can make comorbidities worse or exacerbate their comorbidities. For example, high intensity exercise can make kidney disease worse. It can make retinopathy worse because of increased blood pressure. And I really obviously don't want to do that. So we're going to be very careful with that. And I'll give you guys guidelines for that here in a few minutes. So we have some potential adverse effects of exercise in patients with diabetes. And let's grab, I'm going to use got my highlighter. Let's use our highlighter here. What do we think highlighter color? I think yellow. What's yellow is good. Okay, so for folks with diabetes, we know we want them exercising, but we also know there are going to be some risks. So what are some, let's see, highlight our cardiovascular disease. Well, that's a little bit wobbly, guys. I apologize. So what are some specifically cardiovascular risks for folks who have diabetes? We may have some cardiac dysfunction and arrhythmias that exist already due to ischemic heart disease. We can experience excessive increments to blood pressure during exercise, which makes exercise a little bit more dangerous. They may also have some post-exercise orthostatic hypotension, meaning that due to a loss of blood pressure control, they may get dizzy quickly after exercise. We'll talk about that. We've got to worry about, in the microvascular world, retinal hemorrhage. If they have retinopathy and I have high intensity exercise, that can cause more hemorrhaging, which is going to lead to further loss of vision. We might accelerate those microvascular lesions that occur in the eye and that are also occurring in the kidney, which is going to be a big problem that cannot be reversed. We may worsen hyperglycemia. As we talked about, when a person begins to exercise, we can actually release some glucose that's stored in the body, which can make hyperglycemia worse. We want to watch out for that. And then what are some musculoskeletal issues? Well, foot ulcers, especially in the presence of neuropathy. If a person is out for a long walk, they get a rock in their shoe. Well, if I get a rock in my shoe, I'm going to take it out pretty quick because it's irritating. A person with neuropathy can't tell that rock is there. They may hike 3-4 miles. They may, not take their socks off when they get home. They may develop a wound in their foot they don't know about for a few days. And at that point, we have an infection and some real problems. We really want to watch out for that. We may have some orthopedic injury related to neuropathy. They may trip, they may fall, they may otherwise hurt themselves, hurt their skeleton, hurt their joints due to this loss of sensation, in the feet. So we've got to watch out for that. Also, we have to worry about eye injuries and retinal hemorrhage because the blood vessels in their eyes are weaker, as we've said. Okay. So specifically, if we've got a person with coronary artery disease or peripheral artery disease, we want to incorporate disease-specific approaches for these. Coronary artery disease, we've already talked about. Peripheral vascular disease, we're not going to talk about, but if you do go on for further study, you should learn about that. When we're talking about neuropathy, here's the things that we do not want folks to do. I'm going to put some how about a little yellow star? Contraindicated means do not do it. Don't do it. Remember not to do these, right? Oh, you don't want to on a treadmill because treadmills can be challenging for someone who does not have great balance. They can easily fall off. Also, they may not be able to pick their feet up quickly enough with the treadmill to avoid tripping and falling. We don't want them walking for too long. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. Walking is a great form of exercise, but as we said, prolonged walking can lead to blisters, ulcers, etc. We want to avoid jogging. That high impact not great for their neuropathy. We want to avoid step exercises and then arm exercises if they have neuropathy in their arms. Some things that are great if they know how to swim, swimming or walking in the water, jogging in the water, or water aerobics are all awesome. Now we're reenacting. If you guys can hear this, we're reenacting Kung Fu Panda, the second one with peacocks. Biking is also excellent exercise because it can be a nice high intensity exercise without putting a lot of pressure and strain on the joints and on the feet, which is great. Especially if their neuropathy is advanced, we'd probably want them biking inside for safety. Rowing, chair exercise, etc., are also going to be really great for folks with neuropathy. And just as a reminder, neuropathy occurs when we have damage to the. That looks like it doesn't want to let me use that yellow. We're going to throw some, let's see, dry a little. How about some blue in here? So when we talk about neuropathy, there are a couple different kinds, non-proliferative and proliferative. Just understand that with proliferative retinopathy, we have an increased risk, an increased growth of new blood vessels. So where blood vessels are proliferating here. So this is just a worse type of neuropathy. Of retinopathy. We're going to progress from non-proliferative to proliferative. And even non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy can cause you to lose your sight, aneurysms, hemorrhages, etc. But once we really start growing all these extra blood vessels in the eye, that's when we are really progressing to a very serious state. So we've got some specific recommendations. Now, do I need to memorize the different levels of, sorry, it's messy, guys, diabetic retinopathy? Do I need to memorize this table? No, you don't. But what I want you to understand is that we've got some activities that are going to be discouraged, and the worst that looks like an A, it's supposed to be a star. Now it's a blob. Oh, well, we've got a blob on our. I don't know if it's getting better. Just pretend it's a picture of a flower at this point, right? So some things we want to watch out for. The things are in the red box, right? Just in the red box in general. If a person has diabetic retinopathy, I would avoid these things. Activities that dramatically elevate their blood pressure, like powerlifting, heavy lifting, etc. Activities that involve a lot of jarring, right? So boxing, sparring, any type of like extreme sports that are gonna or heavy competitive sports that are going to lead to a lot of bumping and hitting, because if they get hit in the face or the jars their eye, it can make that worse. So just remember to watch out for those. Now, if they have nephropathy, remember with nephropathy, we lose function in the nephrons. The kidney becomes smaller and it's no longer performing its function as well as it should. And if we accelerate this too quickly, or if we accelerate this at all, it could lead to kidney failure, which is non-reversible. So we know that elevated blood pressure is related to the onset and progression of neuropathy. So quite simply, we want to keep that blood pressure nice and low. We don't have any limitations to low and moderate exercise. We have no limitations to low and moderate intensity exercise, but sorry guys, my clicker stopped working. But we do want to discourage strenuous exercise. I think in general, for someone with diabetes, unless they are very healthy otherwise, I had a coworker, she had type 1 diabetes, but she was super fit. Okay, so these precautions didn't really apply to her. But for anybody who is an unfit person with diabetes, I think it's a good idea to avoid strenuous exercise in general. And if they do have any of these contraindications, to avoid it altogether. Okay, so exercise prescription. We need to get aerobic and resistance training on board for them. Both of these types of exercise work through different mechanisms in the muscle to number one, improve insulin sensitivity and also to decrease blood glucose long term. So aerobic exercise, you use a little bit of sugar or a nice amount of blood sugar every time you exercise. We manage our blood sugar. It's like a little bit of medication every time we exercise aerobically. With resistance training, it does the same thing, but it also enacts a pathway for the muscle to use sugar that's independent of insulin. So it's going to allow us to use more sugar when we're doing resistance training. When we do resistance training, we also increase the size of the quote unquote glucose sponge the muscle is. So the more muscle mass you have, the more glucose you use all day, every day, even when you're sleeping. So if we can use that to chronically increase metabolic control and chronically increase blood sugar use and decrease blood sugar long term, that's going to be very beneficial. So for folks with diabetes, we need to do both aerobic training and resistance training every week. As we said, resistance training increases overall muscle mass, so we have more glucose used overall. So for aerobic exercise, our frequency 3 to 5 days a week. We don't want to ever take too many break days off between aerobic sessions because that's again it's like a little dose of medication every time we do aerobic exercise. So maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, or 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, or both days on the weekends and 3 days during the week. Just make sure that we spread it out nicely. We don't have more than 2 consecutive days between sessions. Intensity is moderate, 40 to 60% of heart rate reserve. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week is our minimum, or 150 minutes a week. Spread that out over 3 days, however you will. Up to 300 minutes a week is great. Types of exercise, going with the contraindications we talked about before, walking, biking, swimming, and other low impact activities. And guys, hold on one sec. Guys, just go ahead and skip past VO2R, heart rate reserve. You guys should have learned that with Dr. Akaviva already, and we're not going to take the time. So just skip on, skip on. Now, if you want to learn this information, drop me a note on email. We'll go over it. Okay, so when we're prescribing exercise for resistance exercise, 2 to 3 days a week, we never want consecutive days. We always want them to have time in between to maximize that glucose control and maximize muscle building as well. Now, if they're doing some complicated splits where they're not using the same muscle 2 days in a row, have some leniency with that. 5 to 10 exercises involving major muscle groups. Moderate intensity, you do not need to take a 1 rep max. You can estimate it like a 10 rep max, for example, is great. 8 to 15 reps per set, 1 to 3 sets per each exercise. Free weights, machines, elastic bands, whatever is going to be safe for them is great. Okay, so that's the end of our slideshow, guys. That's the end of lectures for this week. Hop on over to Canvas. You're going to have an assignment, a short assignment specifically for this lecture, and then some type of a quiz or a case study or something as well, and that'll be it for the week. All right, guys, wash your hands, be safe, etc., and we'll talk to you later.